In the early 90s, actually Fort Lauderdale had a great music scene. There was a lot of bands that, I mean, probably some of the smaller bands still have bigger followings than the bands that are today just because of the way the scene is going. So there's a lot of bands, and a lot of bands had their own thing going on. I mean, you could see that band and know what the imagery behind that band was, and they all had their own thing going on. But I definitely think that Manson and Collapsing Lungs were the two biggest bands, which, you know, sort of looked like a rivalry between the two bands. There was some interest in both sides for Marilyn Manson and Collapsing Lungs, so we were both kind of, you know, I guess in a race to see who would get signed first. And I believe that Trent had offered Manson a deal, and soon after that we were already in talks with a couple labels, and we had decided to go with Atlantic at the time. And then I guess shortly after that, I believe Interscope decided that they didn't want to take on Manson, and they were dropped, which I didn't realize at the time, but that really affected Brian. Later, I mean, I guess after Trent's influence, Interscope came around, and, you know, everything was fine. But I guess there was a period of time that we were signed, and the press was calling us the next big thing, and, you know, that was kind of, I guess, hard for Brian to take at the time. And we would go actually to, you know, we'd be talking to some major labels, and they would say, what other good bands are there? And, you know, we would say Marilyn Manson, and they would laugh at us. They're like, no, we were talking about a real band, not a joke. You know, and I'm sure they're all kicking themselves now. But that was kind of what we got from the industry at the time. They knew about Marilyn Manson, but none of them would take it seriously. And luckily, you know, with Trent's influence and Nine Inch Nails just were huge at the time. I mean, that was a ticket that, you know, he had a free pass to rock stardom. When Marilyn Manson first came back from being signed and touring with Nine Inch Nails, we went to see him down in, I believe it was Miami Arena. And like I said, I was friends with his parents, so I was already, you know, talking with his parents and stuff. And Manson came on and put on a great show. I mean, you could definitely, they were holding their own for such a big place. And I don't know how the fans were taking them. It was kind of a mixed crowd. I mean, they definitely had their fan base, but then there's also these people that were probably being jealous that that's a local band that's making good. And so the show was going, it was, you know, it was a pretty high-end show, but it was pretty safe, I would say. Then when Nine Inch Nails hit the stage, Brian decided that he was going to perform oral sex on Robin, the guitar player for Nine Inch Nails. And I remember I was standing next to his father at the time, and I just looked at his father and, like, tapped him on his shoulder and be like, you got to be proud, because that was kind of, I think, the wildest thing that his dad had seen up to that point. You know, and his mom and dad kind of just shrugged their shoulders, and we went backstage afterwards. Nothing was really said about that. I think everybody just kind of had this little smirk on their face. Brian to his parents, and his parents kind of, you know, they knew he was going to pretty much do whatever he needed to do to make it big. I think the major thing that Marilyn Manson had to do is prove to the world that, you know, this is real. And I think by having Trent say this is real, that was all they needed. So they were able to, any of their ideas, you know, that they came up with now became validated by Nine Inch Nails, the biggest band, you know, at the time. So they had free reign for Insanity, really. And they decided to do a Sweet Dreams cover, which of course was a huge hit, and you know, a crazy video that just, you know, had everybody talking with the imagery. And, you know, saying that, having Trent say that this was all real kind of gave him that ticket to, you know,